Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mission 300 podcast. Today we are on with Tommy and Caleb, and we are having a conversation that is going to enter into the world about young men, community, especially in our current world. As many of you know, it seems like the whole world is shifting. There was a moment where it was almost the shame of becoming a man, and now there's this shift of breaking that has been a part of our culture for the last 20 years. But now there's this vacuum. Where do young men actually go to figure out what the map looks like? Where's the compass? Where's the roadmap? Since it's kind of been stripped away over the last several years. So, as we're going to talk today, we're going to hit an aspect of that referring to how do we create community? How do we step forward? What does it feel like to start stepping into the manly position of our life? How does it feel? What does it look like? What do our friends look like? What do the jobs look like? What are these experiences that we're supposed to be taking on? And how do I be a man when there's so few examples of that anymore? You could go back in history and you see the explorers, the soldiers, the generals, these people we could admire that accomplished something. And today it's just a new generation of effeminized men trying to become men again. And these are our examples that we're looking to try to discover manliness again. So I'm hoping today in this podcast that we could start discussing that and begin entering a journey of what does it look like to be normal for young men to step into the future? And how do we help support and bring the mentorship and the community for them to keep rising and looking at what is normal and what is abnormal? So, with that, you kind of walked into the middle of a conversation we've been having with Caleb and Tommy, and both of them have stepped into their career line and the occupations that they have prepped for. And as you journey into that, you finally get into that occupation, which they're in the middle of. Now you start feeling how do I find community while I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing? And my time is now tied up in my occupation and the area that I'm giving my life to. How do I put balance to everything else where it's funny, go backwards several years when they're both in college dreaming about getting into their occupation and they had community, they had friends, they had all these things around them, but they couldn't wait to get into their direction, that occupation. And now sometimes it feels like, wow, what happened to all that? So that's where we're entering the occupation. I guess I kind of want to kick off with Caleb or Tommy, if you could kind of just summarize what it's like to labor and finally kind of start cracking the surface of this is where my identity is being applied. And what does that feel like in the other areas of your life?
Yeah, so this past year, if anybody's listened to the podcast before, then they've probably heard me repeatedly, maybe annoyingly, talk about the Appalachian Trail, which I completed in 2024, and that kind of left me looking for a job after. And there was kind of a phase in the Appalachian Trail kind of like set me on a course for my life, I think. Just kind of the lifestyle I want to live in that experience, like the principles and who it basically like. I mean, it basically tore me down to nothing, and it was like starting from a foundation and building back from there. And kind of after that, I was looking for jobs, living with my parents, which made me feel kind of like a failure because I was like, oh man, I'm living with my parents while I'm like looking for a job. And at the time, like, and I love my parents, I love being around them and everything, but kind of like as a young man, being 24 years old at the time, I was like, well, I cannot be doing the thing that I am judging other young men for doing, living in my parents' basement. Like what a hypocrite I am here. I need to like get a job. And I was desperately searching and came across one in on the other side of the country. Being from North Carolina led me to Eastern Oregon, which is pretty isolated relative to what growing up in North Carolina is like. It's, the closest city pretty much is 3 hours instead of 20 minutes. And, there it's just a different type of community out here. And that led me to get a job filming hunting and outdoor television, which like in my head at the time when I was finally getting my job, I was like, this is my dream job. Like, are you kidding me? I get to get paid to be outside and go to like remote parts of the US, wilderness in Canada, things like that. And so now we're 8 months ahead of where I was back then. And kind of we were talking and kind of like it's just a completely different perspective now of, man, it is pretty isolated out here. It's pretty lonely in a sense. And it's a different, there really is no community that I've developed yet here. And so kind of like has definitely been a perspective shift of like, well, I would have killed to be where I am right now in my own apartment that I'm making my own money to pay for and all that 8 months ago. Like 8 months ago, me would have been like, what's wrong with you? And slapped me in the face and gone, like, can you not believe what you're doing right now? And that I didn't even have that perspective, honestly, until like talking to Brian and Tommy about everything. But that's kind of like where I'm at in the place of like the excuse me, this like journey of doing what I love, but also the aspect of like there is like when you do what you love, I think there is an aspect of like you will be alone in it. Um, and I think we can definitely get into that and explore that idea and what that means because it's definitely, I think I've also realized it's more common than people may think. And if you look at it in history, it's a pretty common thread. So,
That's good. Maybe Tommy, you could kind of throw your sights into it because it has a similar share, and then we'll kind of pull it back together. Kind of talk this through of some options or thoughts for other people getting started.
Yeah. So if you've been listening to the podcast, just kind of a overall glimpse of the last 3 years is going from school, not really knowing what I want to do after school, to getting a job in sales in an industry I never thought I would be in. Agricultural is primarily the industry we serve, but we serve a variety of different industries. Going from community, living with friends, living with 8 guys at one point in one house, and never coming home to a quiet place. It was always chaos and disorder and a lot of fun. To then moving in with my parents as well for a year, to then marriage, to not having the great start in a career that you thought you would have was designed for you, to breaking into that and starting to learn and starting to grow, to now the point where it's like it's lonely, it's tough, it's hard, it's not easy every day, but also being in community with Caleb, Brian, Jason, friends, uh, coworkers, being in that relationship of people always moving forward and wanting more. There's this like theme of loneliness. And Caleb, when you were just talking there, what I thought of, and maybe this we can expand on too, is being a pioneer versus being a settler. And I think the hardest part for like you, Caleb, and it's a hard part for me too, because like a week ago, I worked from 8 a.m. to 9:30 at night. Was it fun? No. Was it hard? Yes. Did we move forward? Did we push boundaries? Yes. And I am now living the life I was dreaming of that whole step of the way, but I'm not grateful in those moments because I'm not seeing the full picture, that full vision. But I was just is when you're talking there, I was thinking of like the pioneer and the settler, the guy who keeps moving to uncharted territory, who's taking on huge risk, like moving across the country. That is a huge risk. Um, Seeing the vision for what's next. I mean, I know what you're doing now, and I also can see where your future is going. Even though you might not see it, I think me, Brian, Jason, we can start to see the vision of where you're headed. You're not a settler. And I don't think anyone here on this podcast really is a settler. Someone who just sits, builds on the foundations that other people set in place, um, wants consistency and stability. I mean, I think everyone in here longs for a little bit of that pioneer spirit. But I think kind of what we were talking before, um, turning on the record button here is just that loneliness and that struggle. And so maybe we can dive into that just a little bit more too.
So let me just kind of, I'm going to kind of keep you guys, I'm just going to kind of facilitate your two conversations because I think this is super important. There's kind of these two main ideas that you need community. Um, I know what this is like of needing community, but it is when you pioneer a trail. So I feel absolutely extremely blessed to have the podcast crew that we have been together for years. Like even before we started, like we've been in our journey. So I've had the privilege of watching you guys. I feel like that fun uncle where I don't have to be responsible for you, but I get to enjoy the process. Um, I watching all of you guys go from your different stages and seeing what you are. And it's so easy for me to go, oh, just hang on, just get to the other side of this. Let me, I know what it feels like, but just keep going. But then as I look back and I'm inspired by you guys because it reminds me of it's not that history repeats itself, but there's patterns in history that there is times you absolutely need community, but then you have to know when to stand alone. The problem with community is we don't know how to stand alone, so we put everything on the leader to do the standing, and it's probably where the reason we don't like community. Then it becomes more effeminized. But when people actually bring something to community and they could stand alone, like we've kind of done together, there's something solidifying in it. So uh, if you have, this is the bigger challenging part is, unfortunately, my son couldn't be on. He just entered college and starting that new life. So we're in that journey. You guys will have some input. He should be on next week. Um, but one thing that he had mentioned was just being on campus. There's thousands of kids, and he likes meeting all of them and doing activities. But he said, I kind of know these will be my college friends. But then there's a core group that he's in an engineering program, and it's a special project that's kind of volunteer. But those guys are serious about their engineering and they're working on this project. He goes, I see this as my lifelong friends. Like, because they're constantly in this pursuit of growing and expanding and moving forward. And that's the challenge in creating community. And sometimes when we think of community, it's just more of those day-to-day community. But the moment you start growing, it's hard the community doesn't stay with you. And so that's why there's these lonely phases. And I'm not saying don't go get involved in that community. Just don't be shocked when they don't come along with you and you grow to other communities. But then there's a group that can come up with you. And there's a community that fits what you're called to, and they're shaped around that journey. So I guess the question I would kind of ask you in both your two phases that you're in right now, what do you wish the community would be like for you right now? Like if you could go pick your community, like whether it's at church, and I know Caleb, you were talking about earlier, it's like for a young man to go find community in church, it's very hard. It is very hard. It just is not there. We want it to be there. It's not. And it's part of it is because of this core reason. You're looking for the future. You're looking to advance. You're looking to go somewhere. And this group is just a group. And so it's hard finding that group that's doing that. So what would you look for, Caleb? And then what would you look for, Tommy, if you could put the group together? And what does that look like?
I think, like, as far as community goes, there was, well, first of all, like, I would say this podcast has always been like the only way this could get better is if we were like in person together. I think, but as far as like articulating thoughts and like throwing ideas out there without being worried about like, oh man, like this is a little bit too revealing about who I am. Like, are they going to be able to like actually bolster what needs to be bolstered in me, like propped up, and then kind of like shed away the things that I don't need to hear? Like that has always been this podcast for sure. Um, and like Tommy especially, and Brian and Jason, and even hearing like David talk, like honestly, I probably never really cared about running until David started talking about it. And then I was like, oh, hold on. This is something. Like, there's something there. And so, like, especially with the whole idea of endurance, like experiencing that on the Appalachian Trail and experiencing that with other people who are also like working through this idea of endurance. Like, those other people on that trail know what a blister on your foot feels like, and you're still walking 15 miles that day. So fine, like that's to me, that's like almost the definition of community is somebody
Mhm.
who's had a blister on their foot and they go, yeah, I know exactly what that's like, but you're gonna still walk another 15 miles, buddy, because that's what we're doing. And it's raining, and it's hot and humid, and you get cold when you take off your rain jacket, even though it's raining. So you're gonna, and you sweat and then you stink, and it's been 5 days since you've had a shower, but we're gonna keep going. It's like you want the people who know like what that is. And I think like there's different ways. Like I think, putting yourself in the circumstances, but even I've been really watching like a ton of ultra marathon documentaries, and I would encourage you can like go click on any of them and there will be gold in there to find. But there's this recent one called King of Moab, and it's this young guy, Max Jolliffe. He's only like 30 something, and it was his first time running the Cocodona, which is a 250-mile race, like multiple days straight running, and you are competing against other people to win. Some people just are trying to complete it. But long story short, you got to go watch it. But there's this moment in the documentary where he is behind the guy who's in first place. And I don't want to spoil it because it is that good of a documentary. And on during these races, racers will have their pacers who run alongside them to help them set the pace that they should be going to endure the whole race. And at the end, when there's like 50 miles left, which is two marathons just to like get it in your head through the mountains, he is like at the end of the race in second place. And his crew, you have a crew with you, his girlfriend at the time, when they're about to get the last pacer, is like, no, you need to run this one by yourself. Like, go for that last 50 miles by yourself. And if you look in the YouTube comments, like, that's people's favorite moment. I think that's mine too. And I think that's like what I'm looking for in a community, especially like I've found that with Brian and Tommy. And it's not so much like, oh, you need to go do this on your own, but it's like having people who recognize what you're doing, but can also say, like, hey, go run. And I think that's like the whole point of a community is finding those people who are doing that. It doesn't have to be the exact same thing, but doing that same thing where they understand like when you need to like have somebody running with you versus when you need to be encouraged to like keep going and doing your thing, even though you're going to go do it alone through the dark, painfully after it's been tough already. But they like see something in you that they can pull out. So I think that when I think community, that's what I'm thinking. It's like people who can understand your mentality of what you're trying to accomplish. And maybe it's not endurance, maybe it's something else, like what you're trying to build, but they just have a perspective and can speak to what you're doing and kind of push you in that way in a really healthy way. I think that's like, for me, that's like, man, if you can have that in life, I think you can get anywhere because there's like the classic saying of like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And like, I mean, even from you guys haven't heard listening to this, but we had like an hour-long conversation before this, and I think that's like set me up for the month of September. So that's how you have a community. If you can sit
Mhm.
down with people and talk just for an hour and it sets you on track for a period of time that you really need, I think that's like, man, I would pay $1 million for that. I don't like that's worth a lot. And to find it, that's tough, but that's probably another part of the conversation as we go on.
I think you hit the you hit the nail right there. It's spot on. Like you don't need someone who's doing the exact same thing as you in community, but you need someone with the same mentality, the same direction, the same mindset. Like when I hear you talk about endurance, Caleb, like I'm not interested in running a marathon or doing the Appalachian Trail, but I stick with the endurance because I understand it from a whole different perspective of like, oh, a customer just completely destroyed a project that I was counting on 25% of the revenue coming in this year. Okay, time to buckle up and do the hard things daily again and again and again and again and endure when no one's watching. But to have that in community doing different things, different avenues, like I imagine Brian, and maybe you could speak on this too, is like doing missions overseas, like communities got to be so hard over there and to be working day in, night out, working on this and not having like a community necessarily right with you there. But there are people in the fight, enduring in different avenues. And if you can find someone who's locked in on an avenue and they're pursuing with excellence, that for me is what I'm looking for in community. I don't care what it is. If running is your thing, if weightlifting is your thing, if selling houses, selling insurance, whatever, if you're locked in and pursuing something with excellence, that's the type of community I want. And that's what I'm looking for. So like I totally get what you're talking about, Caleb, like with the endurance, but to me it goes to a completely different direction of like, okay, in business, how have I endured day in and day out, doing the little things, small things, pushing through when it feels too hard, having a hard conversation when you don't want to have it, being alert when you want to just sleep and give up. Like all of that applies to running, to trails, to business, to life, to anything. So I would agree, Caleb, 100%.
Don't worry, Caleb. We will get him running here shortly. If I can run, he can run. That's his cop out thing. Oh, I don't really relate to it. No, it's just because he's scared. It's okay. But anyway, moving on from that. No, it's true. No, what you said was true, Tommy. That is, you're when there's a shared principle that you're both embracing. How do I feel on that? We can fully apply it because, as Caleb, you've learned the things you learned on the Appalachian Trail is interesting. You're like in the middle of a life Appalachian Trail, and it's like mirrored the same process, which is why Paul uses sports and the metaphor of running so much because it's so similar. And for anybody who's never read the Second Timothy chapter 2, verse 1 and 1 through 3, 1 through 4, Paul's talking about understand the athlete, understand the farmer, understand the soldier. Starts out with the soldier, the athlete, and the hardworking farmer. Understanding the principles of life are so relative to our spiritual life. So interesting when you're looking for community, why is it? And I'm kind of coming from a Christian perspective, and obviously, our, our faith in Jesus Christ and our relationship with God is like central to all of this. But it almost seems when we're looking for community, it's harder to have real depth of community when it's just geared around. I'm going to just say quote unquote, because this is really a very general statement and not specific to every aspect. But when it's just spiritual matters, there seems to be a loss for young men. And I don't believe it's because they don't like the spiritual matters. I think sometimes I have reasons for that, but why do you think when it comes to church type things, it's hard to get them there unless there's a bunch of other young girls that they're pursuing? It's harder to get young men into church. And let's just remove all of the negatives of church, just the way it is. Versus, I looked up, I did a search on a deep search on the top events that bring young men together. The first two are sporting events by far, which is like 60% of most young males. Between the two of the Super Bowl and March Madness, and then all the in between that leads up to that. That's your biggest category. in the US. Interesting enough for men and young men, 4th of July. And it's a holiday that men do. They barbecue, they launch the fireworks, they do boating. It's all this very it's actually a very manly holiday is the 4th of July. I didn't know that, but I thought that was very interesting. Um, Comic Con. So for those that don't like the physical stuff, Comic Con was the number fourth biggest activity for young men. But that was really interesting. And then number five, and the type of event was a Christian event. And I don't believe it's just because God's being removed from culture. There's an aspect of that, which we could talk about later. But there's a connectivity point that's kind of missing because I think we all want the spirituality. We just want it relatable. So we kind of look at community events. So, like, if you think about, uh, are you more likely to go to a speaking event? What type of community event are you most likely to go to? And since we all love God and there's an aspect of that, just from a Christian event, what is one you're most likely to go to for community? And what does that look like?
You mean like specifically a church event or like
Yeah,
any of
it's a Christian, some kind of Christian event. I'm specifically speaking to this because this is if we don't win this ground,
yeah.
we lose our culture. So I'm trying to hone it into this, but I know we're not good at it. So that's kind of what I want. Maybe if you could just throw a thought and be just brutally honest about it with.
For me, it's definitely doing something. Have to be doing something. And I guess for me at this point, it doesn't really matter what that thing is, as long as it's interesting and I'm moving and having a good time. Like I'll go play ultimate frisbee. Like I don't really care. Like as long as we're moving, having fun, there's some sort of competitiveness to it. It draws me in. Whereas, um, brutally honest, like going to just a men's Bible study, like yeah, I've learned to enjoy those, but like it's not. There's no real draw where if like if you're like one of my buddies was like, oh, we're getting a bunch of dudes to play basketball and we're gonna do like a quick devotional afterwards or hang out afterwards and just be dudes. I'm all over that. Like, yeah, let's do that. That'd be so much fun. And there's way more spiritual conversations that come from that than anything from a Bible study that I've experienced. Like, yeah, we talk about the Bible, but it's all fluff. It's all high level. It's all, oh yeah, yeah, whatever. But like when I'm out there, you know, rubbing shoulders with you and trying to score on you, and then afterwards, like, and be like, yeah, like I'm just feeling really lonely now, and oh, I am too. And all of a sudden, you've made a new friend, you've made a connection, you're doing completely different things, but you have that competitive spirit, that drive. Like, there's just something there that in activity for me, um, that I really enjoy, or
And
getting something out of my comfort zone too.
and I'm going to throw a caveat in for those who don't know Tommy's backstory. He's helped uh, plant a church. He's helped. Uh, I mean, I've coached Tommy since he was, man, eighth grade, and uh, watching him, he was chaplain on our team. He's not foreign to setting up Bible studies. So this isn't an anti-Bible. You just are coming to the reality. This is what draws you. That's the honest part. It doesn't mean that you didn't do those other activities or you're saying they're wrong. What we're looking at is what truly draws us in. And so if you didn't know Tommy's backstory, that's for him to share that. That's kind of a realistic thing because he's done all of it.
Yeah,
Caleb, what about you? Oh, go ahead.
I was just to add to that, and I've done that too. I've led Bible studies where there's nothing but cookies and lemonade, and that's what was to draw people in. Like I've been to the point of where it's like it's this fluff to I've also gone to the point where like it's activities and it's real relationships. So I've experienced it all. And at this stage, just 100%. It's activity along with real authentic friendship.
Hmm, good. Caleb?
Yeah, I'd 100% agree with Tommy. I think I'm probably the wrong person to ask because I've always been like Bible study. I'm not going to that, but not in a terrible way. I actually did start a Bible study in high school that had about two people consistently in attendance, one of them being my friend, and actually one of them who I really respect because after I quit doing the Bible study thing, he kept it going and he started doing like this CrossFit thing and he always was somehow incorporating the Bible into this whole fitness world. And so even getting to interact with him, it was worth it just to go to start that Bible study then. But yeah, I think it has to be something that is like, what are we gonna push the bounds of? Like to me, a perfect church event would be like, oh, there was a storm, let's all go grab chainsaws and chop up trees or something. Like that would be in my head like what do you want to do with men in church? Well, in my head it would be like, well, go be men, like do something that is very specific to that. And I would say like there's been instances where I've experienced stuff like that, but it's not always geared towards that, and don't want to be a hypocrite because I'm not one like starting it or anything. But I yeah, 100% agree with Tommy. If it's not something like that's challenging, that's especially like physically. I think there's something for men where it's like, yeah, it's also challenging to go sit at a Bible study and like try and not be awkward or whatever. That's actually really challenging. But like I think the thing is it needs to be something that's like the men of character. They're going and doing something that's really tough. Like so if you want to attract those people, they're not going to choose to go do something easy. Like where it involves like sitting. I think that's just like what kind of activity you make it is who you're going to attract. Like what you do is who you're going to attract. And so people wonder why it's like, oh, why are there like no men in the church or different, or, just these different aspects. And it's like, well, like I heard back bringing it back to like the ultra marathon thing. Uh, Nick Bear, who has this company, and he's great to listen to because he has faith in God and everything. And he kind of talked about this one time where they put on races as a company, and he tried to one time put on a race that was a little bit easier so that he could get more people to come to it and more people could be involved. Nobody showed up. Nobody. And it was like not even that much easier than their normal insanity stuff where it's like, hey, we're going to do a 100-mile race. It was like a relay race where you were splitting up time. And he said it was like the biggest failure of the company ever putting on this whole event. And it was because it did not attract the kind of people who were normally attracted by what he was doing because they made it easier. They're like, oh, so we can get more people to do this. And all of a sudden, everybody was like, so I'm not going to that. Like, even the slightest amount of compromise on that kind of activity, like, totally changed who's showing up, turned to like nothing. And I think that speaks a lot like to what men are looking for. It's like I'm not looking for something that's going to be like, oh, come along, we'll like sit and chat and call. And there's a time and place for that. Like I don't want to criticize it too harshly, but I definitely think there's something about like what you build. Like there's again, like I'm gonna keep on making references, but there's that movie, the baseball movie, I'm forgetting the name, but in the movie he's like, build it and they will come. And what is that
Field of
movie?
Dreams.
Field of Dreams. And the biggest quote that sticks out to me, which they talked about a lot at the Ramp, a Bible school I went to, was build it and they will come. Like don't like you have to have something in place. And I think like if you want to attract a certain type of person, you have to build this thing with no compromise for it. And I think that's what people are attracted to. And I mean that at least that's what I'm attracted to is something where it's like it will cost you something, it will be hard, and you cannot compromise when you're doing this thing because you won't get away with compromising. And I think that's what people are attracted to because it speaks more to your character and who you can like and the character you can pull out of other people, I think.
No, that's good. In fact, just to since you kind of commented that, you're coming from a perspective you actually, I was with you when you, well, wasn't with you, but part of your journey when you started the Bible study in your school and wanted to do this. And you just gotten back from Thailand, wanted to learn how to do missions, a love for God, sharing with God, went to Bible school, uh, in a school of ministry, very focused, a lot of Bible studies, a lot of prayer meetings, a lot of all that stuff. So when you're coming, it's not a jadedness like I'm against that. It's what truly draws you and challenges your heart to go further, not just in where you're going, but in Him. And these are all true statements. Interesting thing, in our programs in Thailand, we had asked our guys, why don't you like coming, or why do you like coming? And they said, you're kind of making it too easy. The harder we made it, the more people wanted to come. It is just especially guys, it is wired in us that there has to be some sort of challenge. And I think all of us are open to prayer. All of us are open to Bible study. But if I can't walk away and do something with it versus just some theoretical principle that has not been tested, has not been scarred upon, has not been part of the DNA. Like if you read about, and Abraham went into another land and he left his father and mother. Isn't that a wonderful story? We should follow in the faith of Abraham. Yet the moment we go and leave, it's almost like, but you're now going alone. You need community. You can't go by yourself. Well, who did Abraham go with? So community needs to conform to work with what Scripture, because then it has to be real. And then we start challenging the reality of it. And so um, that's what's important to me, is how do we keep the reality yet the intense? And I know we got a Man versus Wild coming up, and we did that before. And we integrate Bible, we integrate prayer, we integrate hearing from God, but in a full challenge set. And I don't even think people will realize what we were doing. And there was no challenge. And back to your points, like we don't like going where it's like, okay, sit down, share our moments, our emotions, and what's really going on inside. But all of us have been around so long with each other. We've all had those moments. That we've all had those moments with each other. It's like, man, I'm not doing well. Why did we feel? We actually didn't have to create a special session around it, because of the relationship of challenge and pushing and believing in each other. It's we've known each other to be able to just be that way. I think that's a natural byproduct versus a special session. If we need a special session for that, there's something wrong with the relationship to begin with. So I'm going to add a little comment on, I was talking about the top events. Sporting events are by far the biggest, or any kind of project-oriented event dominate in all the men's activities. Even if it's a video game event, is huge. Something where they get to do, they're the participant in the project. But I thought this was interesting. The biggest thing that draws young men into programs, and men, is those that provide low pressure environments for camaraderie. In other words, it's not high pressure camaraderie. It's low pressure camaraderie, where you get to flow into that relationship and establish it. And it's not like, I'm forced face to face to be best friends with Tommy now. Okay, here's your partner. You're accountable to Tommy. In that, I mean, I wouldn't mind now. Tommy's pretty great. In fact, anybody would probably want Tommy or Caleb to be that. But if you just met him, you don't want to be forced, because it's like, oh, this is awkward. So it can't be like that. And those things that bypass the need for emotional vulnerability. I know that just goes against the Christian grain, as we need to be emotionally vulnerable. I think guys are actually way more emotionally vulnerable than we want to admit. You just stick them in the right, you go and sweat on the basketball court and beat on each other for about 2 hours and you're exhausted at the end, or you do a whole event like the Man versus Wild and you're exhausted at the end and you're sitting with each other. And the next thing you're just like, man, I'm having a hard time going back to work after this. And pretty soon you give guys 2 hours of adrenaline rush and they'll just spill the beans about everything in life, pretty much. I mean, it's just natural. So you don't have to create the emotional vulnerability. And removing the expectations. There's so many barriers of what it looks like to be a man. And it's like to sit in a group of men, here's how you need to overcome men's biggest challenges. Well, you're telling me what men's biggest challenges are. Why don't you just ask me what my biggest challenge is? If men's biggest challenge is porn, but I'm not struggling with porn, but I have other challenges, why aren't you asking me? I don't want to hear about everybody's porn problem when I'm not having a problem with porn. Maybe I'm, whatever the thing is, you didn't ask me what my challenge is. So I don't want to know what you think the challenge is and teach me what you think the challenge is. I want you to have a relationship with me that I can interact. And uh, this is where sports come in. You do some activity together. You find each other's you see it. It's like, okay. I mean, last Man versus Wild, we had uh, in fact, David, when he gets back on the podcast, everybody thought we set it up for him because he's kind of a physical beast and he just kept winning all the challenges. Like he helped every challenge win just by speed or power or strength. And then it came to the wood chopping. Well, when it came to the wood chopping, um, we played it like golf. So you had every time you had a stroke to break, you had so many logs that you had to cut, and each time is a stroke. So the team with the lowest strokes won. Well, man, he had a lot of strokes, and his team didn't win because of all of his strokes. And he just sat down and goes, "Man, that was the most humbling thing I've ever experienced." Because there's a technique to it. So it's like you you start seeing where people are already vulnerable when you do activities. Now you can help them navigate. Doing an activity solves all those things. So, and it brings in the gospel. It makes it more relative. It brings in Jesus. It's letting God speak to us and telling us who we are, and then we go act on it, and we do that with Him. And it's prayer, it's interaction, and it's just natural. So you're blending all the pieces together. Um, anyway, that's kind of the view of how we've looked at community. I guess the final thing for this kind of podcast is we've been kind of talking through this. Um, what would be your how would you speak to a young man who's got their life kind of like maybe they're in their groups and they have all their friends groups and they're in college or maybe leaving high school or maybe they're in another phase of life where they have this community but they know they need to step into a new phase of life and it feels like they have to leave all that? How would you encourage them to do that? And then how would you mentally prepare them for what they would experience on the other side of it that would still draw them into doing it, but help them be prepared once they get there? Or would you not tell them what they're going to get when they get there and just wait? I guess that's my one of those three.
I don't know if this 100% answers your question, but what that sparked in me was it can be lonely when you're in the pursuit, and sometimes you have to create community. You can't let community find you. So be in pursuit of something and then bring people alongside with you. Even if they're pursuing something completely different, you guys can learn from each other. And then to answer your question, yeah, I'm not going to share with you what it's like when you get there. Figure it out. That's your own joy, right? Like, Brian, you never told me the joy you like that happens when you get in this situation, right? Like it would have it would I would have never listened to it, and I frankly probably wouldn't have cared, or I wouldn't have any respect for it. But now walking through the journey, I understand and I feel the joy. But no, I'm not sharing with you what, because that's your experience, that's your walk,
Mm,
that's your final into that. So
mm.
I don't know if that answers your question
That's good.
completely, but
That's
those are
good.
my
Good
some of the
insight.
thoughts. Yeah.
I agree. Like I wouldn't try and tell people what's on the other side or like it's gonna suck real bad. But no, I'm just kidding. I think like honestly, if I had to tell myself something, and it's funny because I also know like telling myself this, I probably wouldn't listen anyways. So it's kind of like, well, what's the point? But if I were to try and help myself, I would probably say like for someone to become fully who they are, that is an uncommon thing. And so to go do something that is uncommon, you will not be common, which means you're not going to be around other people per se who are common because they're not stepping into who they are. But I think like just from what I've seen in my life, I really do have like some sense of faith that if you step into the uncommon thing, like of being who you are, like that's going to attract the other people who are also uncommon
Mm.
because like they'll recognize that. And I think that's the thing with that race that he put on that failed, where he like brought it down and compromised it to try and bring more people into it. And it failed epically. And I think that's the thing is like you got to step into fully who you are meant to be, which is going to be uncomfortable because there's not a lot of other people doing that. But I think God will put people in your path naturally because you'll naturally attract other people doing this. Or like God already has people around you who have also done this. Like that's what I found in my life with Tommy, Brian, and Jason. It's just like you can't, some things you can't see. Like there's certain aspects of like Brian's life that I would have never understood until I started doing some of the stuff I've done, where it goes like, oh, that makes sense why Brian has told me that before. Like where it's like stories coming back, especially like stories from my dad that like when he told me, I'd be like, oh, cool story, dad. And now like thinking about it, I go, oh my goodness. Like my dad lived what I'm experiencing right now. So I would say like, it's easy to say it's worth it. And like probably an hour or 2 hours ago, before I talked to Tommy and Brian, I would have been like, it's not worth it. Don't do it. And then I like talked to them for an hour and was like, oh, okay, yeah, of course. Like it just makes sense. You got to go do this. But it's definitely like when you get into it, it's not going to feel like that. So really trying to remember like stepping into who you are like will be worth it, even if it doesn't seem like it. And God will bring around the other people who are also doing that. Hopefully, I really pray because like I don't think I could do it on my own without the people around who are doing the same thing, like being fully who they are in God. So I hope that makes sense, but and it actually won't make sense until you're in it and you're
Mm.
like deep in it and where it's a little bit painful. And then it'll be like, hopefully you remember that. Not what I'm saying is perfect, but hopefully that revelation comes to you because that'll really help you out. But it won't make sense right now. But yeah.
So what you're saying is these are like those little legends on the map that we ignore. So you finally go, oh, that's what that means. And then it
Oh
finally
yeah.
makes sense. It finally makes
It's
sense.
like looking at the mountain you have to climb and seeing the elevation change and going, that looks like it might be a little rough. And then when you get into it, you go, I cannot believe how bad this is. The map doesn't do it any justice. And then when you get to the end of it, you're like, wow, it wasn't that bad. But that's exactly what it's like. The map and seeing and depending on where you're on the map, it all changes and perspective is everything on that for sure.
One
So for
one
the what?
thing,
Go ahead.
I
Go
was
ahead, Tommy.
sorry to interrupt, but
No.
just one thing to add on to that too is I think Caleb, with what you're talking about there too, I was just thinking too, I'm like, when you're in the fight, in the battle, and pursuing what you're doing, don't make any rash decisions by yourself alone. Consult your community, your group of that inner circle that you trust, because sometimes all you need is that little boost, that 1 hour conversation, that 5 minute conversation sometimes to just get you over that mental hump. Um, I think just recently, me and my wife um, we were in Washington and we went on a hike. And it wasn't a long hike. It was nothing like Caleb does. It was just we got there at 3 in the afternoon and just walked a couple miles. But we got to a point where we were in this little basin area and there's like a little lake and we're like, oh wow, this is like this isn't where we were expecting to go. What, we're expecting to see a mountain and stuff. And um, we kind of saw like a cut up into the mountain. And it was just like a straight up walk. And we're like, huh, like we wonder if that's the one. And we're like, I don't know if we could do that. And we're like, all right, let's just see. And if we get to the top there and it's nothing, then we'll just turn around and head back. Well, we got to the top and that's where it was. That was the amazing view that everything was there. So sometimes it is that little, take a little break, regroup, and make that last final sprint up to the top and it starts to open up.
Hmm. I think what you guys illustrate is, first of all, um, you guys, since the very young, so Caleb, you were 14 when you came to Thailand, 15?
Yeah, that exactly. Yeah.
Tommy, you were 14, 15 when we connected. I started coaching you. Jason was just fresh out of college. So that was 11, I was 13, almost 14 years ago was Jason. And you guys pursued this. And over time, it starts out where, you know, I'm kind of the senior and you're asking questions and advising. But as we've done life together, even those that you're mentoring, we become, our relationship is way different because I learned just as much from you guys. Always have, actually. Just couldn't tell you I was. Um, we glean from each other and having the different ages. But I think the biggest thing that I have gained and being around other people that are going further and reaching into other people's lives that are going further than where you're going is you have to pursue it. You do. Like it doesn't come to you. So if you're saying if community comes to you easy, it may not be the best community for you. I'm not saying don't develop relationship with them, but it may not be the community that launches you. And so the community that launches you is the one you have to step into and you have to kind of reach your hand into and be awkward and let it kind of pull you up because in the long term, they're needing you too. Um, so there's that. And then the other thing that I just kind of wanted to highlight is you be okay with your stages that when you do feel like you're lonely, don't look for something to fill the loneliness. Just stay in it. Like, okay, what can I give myself to in the middle of the loneliness? That's where everybody gets in trouble. But if you could master the loneliness at the young age, number one, you won't have the difficulties in life that most people have to overcome. Number two, you'll start shaping your relationship with God and you'll find these fantastic relationships will come your way and the camaraderie. And third, it's okay to enjoy the activities because I'm a firm believer that we're spirit, soul, and body. And if natural things I'm doing, but I'm doing it with God, in God, complete in Him, my natural is just as spiritual. So they're all one. So don't separate them. Sometimes the most quote unquote spiritual things have nothing to do with spirit. And sometimes the most mental, it's a combination because we're a three-part being. So those are my final thoughts. Do you guys have anything else that you'd want to add to the listeners this evening?
One thing I would say, like, if you're maybe not in the middle of like this, like, because you also mentioned, Brian, like somebody getting out of high school or somebody who's like in the next phase of life. And I think like one thing I was thinking about for myself, like I really want to start running, but man, I've gotten out of shape since the trail. And I'm like, well, there is no way I can run like even 5 miles or 8 miles. So like there's this concept of like, well, I shouldn't even go run 1 mile because I'll look dumb out there or whatever. But I think this in relation to like this like kind of pursuing thing is like just start. Like because you may like be like, well, I have my community and all this stuff that's really nice and I'm really comfortable right now and like I don't even know how I would get to the point where I could see myself being like fully doing like the things that are who I am. And I think like if you just start in some increment consistently, like go for it. Like I know I need to run no matter what 1 mile per day to get to where I want to go in a year from now, because no matter what, that time is passing. Like 1 year is happening no matter what I do. And so if you're like listening to this and you're like, well, I'm not even like in this phase of being uncommon or like fully who I am, like probably me, like at the beginning of the trail, 20 miles. Are you kidding me? I probably would have dropped dead. And by the end of the trail, I was hitting 20 miles. Where I am again now, 20 miles, I might not drop dead, but I will not be able to walk for like a day or two right after. But it's the same process of like, just do it, just go for it, and you will get there. And then you can be facing these challenges of like, okay, now I'm going to attract these other people who are also challenging themselves. Whatever it is, like do 1 mile of it per day, do half a mile of it per day, like consistently. Like that's what I've seen Tommy do with the sales thing when he's talked about in the past. Like I didn't even know, like walking down to the conference to talk to people was like he was just talking to one person, like, but he did it consistently. Now where he is today, crazy difference, crazy difference. Like you can just see it in his confidence. And so I think like doing that, whatever it is for yourself to become who you are, become uncommon. And then you'll find yourself in this place that we're talking about where it's like, what do you do when you're alone in it? But you got to get there to like challenge yourself. So I think like go for it, whatever it is, be consistent and be terrible at it at the beginning. And then like wait a year and then like give up on it if nothing happens in 5 years and nothing changes. Okay, maybe it wasn't the thing, but like either way, the time is passing, so you might as well do a little of something. And it'll take you 2,000 miles if you start walking. So just go for
Good.
that.
Good.
To sum up what you just said, Caleb, and to add some clarity to that story too, is just consistent daily action of moving forward with whatever you're going to do. That you reminded me of that story just now, and to think full circle now, this last conference I was at, someone walked up to me, but it took 3 years of walking out of my comfort zone, getting into something new to have someone walk up to me and still take that project through to completion. But it's that daily consistent action of stepping out in comfort zone,
So true.
discipline, all of that.
So true. And the more, what's good is the more you step out, even though you might hit phases where you feel like you're a little out of shape, there's your body has a muscle memory, and those muscles come back quick. They really come back quick. So even if you've been out of it for a little bit, step back in, but reach up, find a mentor, and just reach out to them and put yourself out there. And some may not have the time, some will. Don't feel rejection. Just keep stepping out there. It is definitely worth it because that's where your lifelong relationships are going to come from. All right. With that said, hey everyone, thanks for joining in. Thanks for listening. And until next time, keep the faith, stay in the fight.